Part 1, The Key That Shouldn't Exist. The Redford Inn sat alone on the Montana roadside like a relic from another century. Its wooden frame sagged, its rooflines crooked under the weight of 100 winters, and its neon vacancy sign buzzed in a soft, sickly red that barely cut through the dusk. For the last 20 miles, Ethan Cole hadn't seen another car, just miles of pine, asphalt, and sky that had bled from gold to bruised purple. He parked in the gravel lot, the crunch of tires echoing in the quiet. As he stepped out, the air was cold enough to bite. Somewhere far off, a coyote yipped, its cry fading into the stillness. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old coffee. The reception desk was an antique thing, all dark wood and brass trim, its surface worn smooth by decades of elbows and paperwork. A woman in her 60s sat behind it, hair in a tight bun, a crossword book open in front of her. "Evening," Ethan said, setting down his duffel. "Evening," she replied, not looking up. "How long you staying?" "One night," he said. "Passing through. Thought I'd get a feel for the place. I write about unusual locations." That made her glance up. Her eyes were a clear, pale blue, and not friendly. "Unusual how?" "Strange histories. Odd architecture. Local legends. That sort of thing." He smiled politely. "This place has a reputation, you know." The woman's expression didn't change, but her fingers paused over the crossword. "Reputation for what?" Ethan shrugged. "Heard a rumor on the road. Something about a locked room." 306? The woman closed her crossword with deliberate slowness. "There's no room 306 here, sir." He raised an eyebrow. "Really? Must have misheard." Her gaze stayed on him a moment too long before she reached for a key from the wall, a tarnished brass tag engraved with 204. "Second floor. Stairs are to your right. Ice machines down the hall." Her tone made it clear the conversation was over. Ethan didn't push it, not yet. But later, after a microwaved dinner and a few pages of half-hearted writing, the itch returned. If there was no room 306, why did locals whisper about it? Why had the story been so consistent from the gas station in Livingston to the diner in Redford? At 10:42 p.m., he left his room, camera in hand, telling himself it was just to stretch his legs. The hallway lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the carpet muffled his footsteps. The second floor was quiet except for the occasional groan of the building settling. He passed numbered doors, 201, 202, 203, and stopped when he reached the end of the hall. The sequence jumped strangely, 304. 305, then 307. No gap. No bricked-up doorway. Just numbers skipping over one. He turned back toward his room, and that's when he saw it. Halfway down, lying in the middle of the carpet as if dropped seconds ago, was a key. It was brass, dull with age, its edges nicked. The number tag was oval, worn smooth by handling, but still readable, 306. Ethan crouched, picking it up. It was colder than the air, heavy in his palm. As his fingers closed around it, the lights above him flickered, just once. Then came a sound. Not loud. Not sharp. But clear. The quiet, distinct click of a lock turning. He spun toward the nearest door, but none had moved. The hall was exactly as it had been. Except now, the air smelled faintly metallic. Ethan slipped the key into his pocket, telling himself it was for safekeeping. But deep down, something in him knew the truth. He'd just been invited into a room that didn't exist. Ethan walks back to his room, but as he reaches for the doorknob, he feels something strange. The key in his pocket is warm now, almost pulsing, as if it has a heartbeat of its own. Part 2. Entering the room no one cleans. Ethan told himself he wouldn't use the key. That was the plan. But by morning, the promise already felt hollow. The brass tag sat on the desk beside his laptop, catching the pale winter light leaking through the curtains. Every so often, it would seem to glint, not from the sun, but as though a flicker of movement had passed across it. He tried to write, to focus, but his eyes kept drifting to it. By 9:30 a.m., the front desk clerk had left for her morning coffee run. The lobby was empty. If there was a time to look, it was now. The third floor was different. He noticed it the moment he stepped off the stairs. The hallway was narrower, the carpet older and matted flat, its once bright floral pattern dulled to gray. Half the light bulbs were dead, leaving long stretches in shadow. And the air, colder. Not the natural kind of cold from bad heating, this was deeper, almost damp. He walked slowly, the sound of his footsteps swallowed by the hallway. Doors passed on either side, 301, 302, 303, 304. Then, the jump. 305, and then 307. Except this time, there was space between them. A door-sized stretch of wall, faintly warped, as if the wood beneath the wallpaper had swelled. Ethan stopped, heart thudding. He took out the key. The number 306 gleamed in the dim light. He reached out to touch the wall, and his hand met a doorknob. Not flush with the wallpaper, but solid and cold, as though it had always been there and he had simply failed to see it until now. The brass key slid into the lock without hesitation. The click was soft, final. The door swung inward on silent hinges. The first thing he noticed was the smell, not the must of a long-unused room, but something sharper, metallic. Underneath it, the faintest trace of damp earth. Dust covered everything, dresser, desk, lamps. But the bed was different. The sheets were rumpled, the pillow indented, as though someone had just risen moments ago. Ethan stepped inside. The carpet felt wrong beneath his shoes, softer, thicker, almost spongy. In the far corner sat a single suitcase. Old, brown leather, its brass buckles green with tarnish. A faded paper tag dangled from the handle. The initials were clear, D.H. Daniel Harper. The name from the rumors. Ethan pulled his camera from his bag, snapping a few shots. The shutter clicked, but when he checked the preview screen, every image was black. He adjusted the settings, tried again, nothing. A faint unease prickled the back of his neck. He crossed to the nightstand. On it sat an old notepad, the hotel's faded logo printed at the top. One page had been torn off in a ragged edge, but on the second page, in shaky, desperate handwriting, 4 words were scrawled, "Don't let it out." A sudden thud made him spin. The door had closed. Not slammed, exactly, just shut, quietly, firmly, without his help. For a long moment, Ethan stood frozen, the sound of his own breathing too loud in his ears. Then he heard it. From under the bed, a long, slow exhale. Ethan crouches down, lowering his head toward the floor. The space under the bed is pitch black. As his eyes adjust, he realizes it's too deep, far deeper than the frame could possibly allow. Something shifts inside that darkness, and a pair of pale, human-like hands curl forward, stopping just short of the light. Part 3, the thing under the bed. The air under the bed was colder, he could feel it against his face. A breath colder than the rest of the room. Ethan stayed crouched, muscles tight, the camera dangling uselessly from his neck. The darkness beneath the bed wasn't normal shadow. It was thick, almost oily, and it didn't stop where it should. The space stretched back and down, as though the bed frame opened into something much larger, deeper. The hands moved again. They were pale, too pale, the skin almost translucent, the veins beneath a faint blue. Long, narrow fingers curled lazily against the carpet, the nails cracked and yellowed. Then came a whisper, close enough that he felt it in his ear even though nothing was near him. "You have the key now." Ethan flinched so hard he nearly toppled over. His elbow clipped the nightstand, knocking a dusty glass to the floor where it rolled in slow, uneven arcs. He staggered back from the bed, his eyes locked on the shadow. The hands stayed where they were, just outside the spill of daylight from the window. It was as though the thing beneath couldn't, or wouldn't, cross into the light. His heartbeat was a hammer in his chest. He looked toward the suitcase in the corner. It seemed suddenly closer. He swore it had been against the wall, but now it sat angled toward him, as if it had been nudged forward. Every instinct told him not to touch it. He touched it anyway. The leather was cold and damp. The brass buckles squealed faintly as he undid them, the sound unnaturally loud in the heavy air. Inside, everything was neatly folded, shirts, trousers, socks. Beneath them, an envelope containing a folded newspaper. The Redford Gazette, October 21, 2006. The front page headline, "Local businessman found dead in hotel room." The grainy photo was of Daniel Harper, smiling stiffly in what looked like a headshot from a company website. The article was vague, citing unexplained causes and no signs of forced entry. The only concrete detail was the date, exactly 17 years ago to the day. Under the newspaper lay something else, a black VHS tape, the kind Ethan hadn't seen in years. Across the label, in faded red marker, were the words, "Watch before midnight." He glanced at his phone. 11:04 a.m. Plenty of time. Without looking back under the bed, he didn't want to know if the hands had moved. Ethan slipped the tape into his bag and backed out of the room. When he turned to close the door, he froze. The hallway beyond didn't look right. The wallpaper pattern didn't match the rest of the inn, and the light bulbs were flickering in a slow, rhythmic pulse. He stepped through anyway. The moment he crossed the threshold, the hallway was back to normal, cheerful beige wallpaper, steady lights, muffled hum of the vending machine down the hall. When he looked back, there was no door between 305 and 307. Just uninterrupted wall. Ethan headed straight for the front desk. The same clerk was there, her crossword open again. "I just came from," he started, but she cut him off without looking up. "There is no room 306 here, sir." Her voice was flat, recited, as if she'd said those words too many times to count. That night, sleep didn't come. The suitcase. The hands. The way the hallway changed. The tape sat on the desk beside the key, almost daring him to watch it. Around 1 a.m., he gave in. The inn's lounge had an old TV and, by some miracle, a VHS player still hooked up beneath it. Ethan slid the tape in, the machine clunking in protest before the screen flickered to life. At first, the footage was grainy, the time code in the corner reading October 20th, 2023, 10:36 a.m. It was him, walking down the third-floor hallway. The video showed him unlocking the door to room 306. He watched himself step inside, glancing around cautiously. Everything looked the same, except for one detail. In the video, the door didn't close by itself. A hand, pale, thin, with long, cracked nails, reached out from inside the room and pulled it shut. The tape flickers, the image distorting. A man appears in frame, not Ethan, sitting on the bed, staring directly into the camera. His face matches the grainy newspaper photo. His voice, calm but urgent, says, "If you're watching this, you've unlocked it again." Part 4, the last guest's warning. The man on the screen sat perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, eyes fixed on the camera. "If you're watching this," he said, voice low and even, "you've unlocked it again. That means it's awake. And you don't have much time." Ethan leaned closer, the static hissing faintly in the background. The man's face was older than the newspaper photo, tired, unshaven, sweat beading along his hairline. "My name is Daniel Harper. 17 years ago, I made the same mistake you just did." As he spoke, something moved behind him. The bedsheets shifted, a slow ripple as though something heavy was pushing up from beneath. Harper didn't look back. "Whatever's in this room, it's not human. It's been here longer than the inn, longer than the town. I don't know what it wants, but I know what happens if you let it out." The camera jolted suddenly, as if someone had bumped into it. Harper's voice rose. "Don't stay past midnight. Whatever you do, keep it in the room. If you see the hallway change, it's already trying to pull you back in. Don't answer it. Don't." He froze mid-sentence. His eyes flicked to the bed for the first time. The ripple under the sheets had become a mound, rising, swelling, until the fabric stretched tight. Something was breathing under there. Harper's chair scraped back. The camera tilted sideways, showing only the lower half of the bed as the bulge grew larger, heavier. Then came the sound, wet, dragging, like something pulling itself across damp fabric. Harper shouted, not words, just raw panic, and the camera fell to the floor. The last thing visible was a pale, skeletal hand sliding off the bed, fingers splayed, reaching toward the lens. Static swallowed the rest. Ethan's throat was dry. He checked his phone. 11:47 p.m. His stomach dropped. The old building was silent except for the faint hum of the lounge's vending machine. Then, somewhere far down the hallway, came 3 slow knocks. He froze, listening. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. They were getting closer. He turned toward the lobby, but the lights above flickered once, and when they came back, the exit sign was gone. The hallway stretched longer than it should, fading into shadow. The knocks continued, steady as a heartbeat. Finally, they stopped. Something tapped his door. Not hard, just enough for the wood to flex ever so slightly. Ethan's chest tightened. He moved to the peephole, expecting to see the empty hallway. But it wasn't the hallway at all. It was room 306. The peephole showed the bed, the same fresh, rumpled sheets he'd seen earlier, and the covers were rising slowly, as if something was lifting them from underneath. He staggered back, the key in his pocket burning hot now, a throb he could feel in his thigh. Somewhere behind him, the TV in the lounge crackled back to life on its own. Harper's voice came through the static, not from the screen, but from somewhere closer, almost inside the room with him. "You've got 12 minutes. Don't waste them." Ethan turns toward the sound, and sees the hallway outside his door is no longer empty. At the far end stands a figure in a dark suit, head tilted slightly, its face hidden in shadow. In its hand dangles a tarnished brass key, not his. Part 5, Checkout is permanent. Ethan didn't move. The figure at the end of the hall stood perfectly still, the brass key swaying faintly in its hand. The light above it flickered just enough to reveal a pale wrist, too thin, the skin stretched tight over bone. Then, in the time it took for the bulb to stutter again, the figure was gone. The hallway lay empty. Except now, the door to room 306 was open. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. He took a step backward toward the lobby, but with each step, the hallway seemed to stretch longer, the front desk retreating like a mirage. The air grew colder. His breath fogged. He turned to run for the stairs, and found himself facing the open doorway again. The number plate on it was rusted and pitted, but still legible, 306. From the darkness inside came a voice. "You left it open." The key in his pocket pulsed hot, almost painfully. He reached for it, but his fingers wouldn't let go once they touched the metal. It pulled him forward, step by unwilling step, until he was inside. The room looked different. The bed wasn't by the window anymore, it was against the opposite wall. The suitcase was gone. On the mattress lay a mirror, full length, positioned flat like a sheet of glass. But it didn't reflect Ethan. It showed Daniel Harper. Harper's eyes were wild, his grin too wide. "Told you not to stay," he said. His voice was perfectly clear, though his lips didn't quite match the words. Then his hand reached out of the reflection. The glass rippled like water as his fingers closed around Ethan's wrist. Ethan yanked back, but the grip was impossibly strong. Harper pulled. Ethan fell forward, into the mirror, into the cold, into the black. He landed hard on something soft. It took him a moment to realize it was a mattress. He was lying on a bed. His own bed. Room 204. The morning light spilled through the curtains. Birds were chirping outside. Ethan sat up, heart still pounding. Maybe it had been a nightmare. Then he saw it. On the nightstand sat the key to room 306. Only now, the brass was polished, the engraving crisp, as if it were brand new. And in the reflection on its surface, tiny and distorted, was his own face. Mouth open. Whispering, "Don't let it out." The camera of the story pulls away, drifting down the Redford Inn's hallway as a new guest checks in. They set their suitcase by the front desk. The clerk smiles, handing over their room key. Somewhere behind the desk, on the lost and found shelf, sits a single, untouched brass key. The tag reads, 306. The faint sound of 3 knocks echoes from the 3rd floor. Slow. Measured. Waiting for someone to answer.